welcome everyone. Thank you for attending today's session. I am so very happy and grateful to be here today. This is my first time at DBT Coalesce, first time presenting as well. Thank you. So I will be kicking off today's breakout session, industry best practice. And I'm really excited to be able to share with everyone why data alone is not enough. So a little bit about me first. My name is Preston Wong. I'm an analytics engineer at Settle. I am an avid cyclist in the Los Angeles area, so if you see me, say hi. I somehow convinced myself that what fun is cycling uphill for 30 minutes, and then I enjoy a 2-minute descent. I was like, totally worth it. Yes, all that pain and suffering. And I have a large golden doodle. His name's Alfie. Doesn't look too happy in the pictures, but I can assure you if he was here today, he would body slam everyone and say hi. And lastly, a fun little tidbit at work. A work tidbit is that I'm always the first one to review and approve PRs. Once I get that notification, I'm there. I got your back. Let's get that code pushed through. So a little bit about my journey in analytics engineering. Hopefully some others can relate, but it started with the first interaction with data. I started as a data analyst at a consulting firm. My main day-to-day tasks looked like running and maintaining a catalog of SQL scripts, just to refresh updated reports, very manual, create table, update this table, insert some records. But really the majority of the work were ad hoc requests. These ad hoc requests were answering questions from stakeholders, questions like, what line of business performed best in Q4? Give me a list of companies with $5 million in revenue in the manufacturing industry that has 50 plus employees. That way we can perform good scale audits that met the criteria, for example. Anyways, to answer these questions, I maintained and organized a notepad of SQL queries that I could reuse. I just had to do that right lookup with to find the right query, pull those results from the database, and then drop those results into an Excel file. Then I can send it off. To me, I always thought it was like a manual version of DBT. I was like reusable queries, models, similarly, and that's how I like to think of it. So from that, I was like, I like to think that I'm a problem solver. And being able to create these reports and answer these questions was addicting. But the not so addicting part, these repetitive tasks and processes to be able to deliver the data. I came to the realization that I was spending a lot more time in the tooling and having to generate these reports over and over again than actually having time to look at all the other data that we had in the company. So that really made me question, like, there's gotta be a better way to do this, right? And I'm not the only one who faces these roadblocks on a daily basis. And I want to help my stakeholders, who are subject matter experts in their own domain, not have to encounter these same repetitive tasks that I went through to build a simple report. So how could I help the past me succeed? And that really led me to discovering analytics engineering as a practice and career. And I was very fortunate to join a small startup that showed me and taught me what DBT is. And this startup that I joined specialized in building reporting solutions around transactional data. So it sounds like more reporting, right? But no, this time I was not doing the manual reporting aspect of it. I was building processes and systems to standardize transactional data into reusable models that we could deliver as a product. So with DBT, I was able to utilize macros to help parse, transform, aggregate this transactional data and output it into a simplified table, a beautiful view of financial reports that our accounting clients could use. All ran with a single command versus those multiple queries that I had to go through. It was like magic to me. So in analytics engineering, I discovered a way to harness the power of data and apply it to the business problems, all while eliminating those pesky repetitive tasks. Tools like DBT opened a new world of possibilities, making the practice not only efficient, but genuinely enjoyable. So fast forward today, I find myself now at Settle as an analytics engineer with tons of data and many problems to solve to help create the best products to allow small businesses to scale. And a little bit about Settle, we're an all-in-one solution for a small business. It's a unified operations platform for consumer packaged good brands, bringing product, procurement, inventory, payments, and financing together to help brands scale faster and more profitably. Now, diving back into the content, I like to start with this great blog from Locally Optimistic, which is written for and by data professionals. Reporting is a gateway drug. So this is so very much true when I start to think about it. Reporting is addicting and can uncover a lot of things at the surface level. Being able to answer questions with data in a report, it's what propelled me into the world of data. But after creating these reports, time after time, I had to think further. Are these reports really being meaningful? Are they driving change? Are they actually being used? Why do I spend 7 hours for someone to look at it in 2 seconds? So, like any drug, it's really exciting at first, and we want to get as much as possible, right? But then we build that tolerance to it, and it becomes a matter of something that we just need to sustain for our day-to-day. And reporting can be thought of as the same way. If executed well, it could be that gateway drug, resulting in an organization that is completely addicted to its analytics team. But if executed poorly, the analytics team can turn into a bunch of reporting junkies, and we kind of all know what that's like. Data initiatives these days are too focused on democratizing access to information and not focused enough on driving business impact. No amount of information will alone drive change in an organization. For meaningful change, companies need their information tied to the tooling that allows them to drive that change. So what does that look like? So if only it was as simple as granting everyone in the organization Snowflake access to all the tables, opening the floodgates, just be like, figure it out. Create your own SQL queries, learn how to do a cross-join with a window function to obtain this small little metric that you need. But say for someone in sales, even with their technical skill set, giving them access to Snowflake to create their own queries and so on will not necessarily drive that business impact. Not only is that more work for that salesperson, it also becomes more work for myself and the data team to have to maintain those inefficient SQL queries, a messy data warehouse, or having non-version controlled code just run whenever it wants to. So at first, it may be easier to hand off, thinking that I'm helping someone by empowering them with all the data available. But really, that issue will just come back and my role becomes senior data janitor, having to clean up other people's data full time. So the past way of thinking is data democratization, making data available for the sake of it. But really, the new way of thinking is now driving business impact. And how do we drive that? Some examples of this would be creating new revenue, being more efficient, growing more quickly, building better organizations, and identifying pains before they're problems, being proactive instead of reactive. So another way to think of it is how can data teams be empowered to unlock the full potential of a business's data? And to answer that question, we have this data team maturity scale. Data and analytics teams have become increasingly important in organizations in the most recent years. And data teams are piecing together data in the warehouse because companies are scattered across so many multiple systems. And for data teams, they're often an arm's length away from the actual work and the data being generated. So to build relationships with these stakeholders and domain experts who are doing the work, data teams must do a significant amount of reporting. This reporting is actually fine when it's part of the toll paying to eventually move up into the data maturity scale, into insights and then predictions. So if we start from the bottom, reporting is a simple way of answering questions. These answers to these simple questions give an idea of what data is needed, but doesn't allow for that standardization, collection, or tracking of data. And when obtaining data is hard, you never really move past reporting. But luckily today, with tools like dbt, the rise of analytical data warehouses like Snowflake, data is easier than ever to get. That means we can level up to the next level of insights. While reporting analyses are about gathering facts to report on them, insights can be thought of as understanding relationships between the facts. Insights for data teams is where value really starts to be generated. And being data-driven means you've crossed into a place where decisions are influenced by data, not finding data that matches a simple goal. So from insights, then we can reach top of the scale at predictions. A mature data analytics team can use predictive analyses to help drive the business forward then. And so, because like I mentioned, we're so addicted to reporting, many teams, and sometimes myself even, really never break out of their reporting roles. This large queue of tickets and requests for new models, reports, dashboards just never seem to end. There will always be another report for you to create. Don't identify actionable insights. Take action. So why wait for the data team to provide numbers when honestly, we don't have the correct context to pull these numbers? We're just kind of solving the ask at hand usually. Instead, we should focus on what results we're trying to drive toward. Focus on the why, which will help the data team understand the ask and be able to contextualize the numbers instead of blindly pulling them from some source we assume is correct. So a nice example would be, like, we have net new active customers in Q3, and it's been growing steadily. But this most recent month is 20% higher. Even if a data person catches this, it is unlikely they have the direct context to address this. This data doesn't include that there was a recent acquisition in the company and that they acquired their customer base, which is the explanation for that 20%. The data can't explain it, someone else has to explain it, and that could have answered why, essentially. So going back to the data team maturity scale, we want to know, how do we move up and out of these reporting roles? Well, to answer that, our data team here at Settle utilizes a framework created by our lead product manager, Emily Sherio, which is called the jobs to be done of modern data teams. So this framework is something our data team at Settle utilizes to drive impact to our organization. For some context, our data team is small, relatively lean, but mighty, total of 3 of us, and we collectively have roughly about a year of experience together, myself hitting 5 months as of last week. So the base foundation was laid out for us. We came in with 1,000 plus already built models to maintain and evolve, but as such a new data team, how could we massage those pain points that the previous team faced and also add value, create that value that we want to add? Each one of those jobs helped us create value in our team and how our organization is using data, as well as provide us a good roadmap for how we want to leverage it across the business. So I'll start with data activation. Data activation is making operational data available to the teams that need it. The problem. For the problem marketing asks, I want to see a list of churned customers in HubSpot to send automated emails for touchpoint and outreach. By implementing data activation, we can increase access to key data for stakeholder teams and improve business processes. So a little bit more about that problem and how we solved for this. To achieve this, data from diverse sources, mainly including our internal data, are consolidated into dbt models that live in our centralized data mart. This data mart serves as a comprehensive representation of the business, encompassing attributes, feature flags, and metrics crucial for decision-making across sales, marketing, and operation teams. So with this structured data mart with dbt at its core, it helps empowers our go-to-market teams, as well as make informed decisions, offering that single source of truth. And by utilizing this together with high touch for reverse ETL, we can have that single source of truth, that enriched data, seamlessly synced back to each of the team's preferred and primary SaaS tools, whether that be like Salesforce, HubSpot, Intercom. And that really enables efficient data activation and real-time insights, ensuring consistency and flexibility across departments. So by leveraging data activation, we had streamlined this workflow, and instead of spending hours on getting the data to perform the task at hand, we reduced it down to minutes now. We now provide the marketing team with that comprehensive data set of businesses directly in HubSpot, suitable for multiple use cases, and this approach has allowed them to simplify their tool set, and it the result is essentially an efficient self-serve model where marketing has direct access to up-to-date relevant data, and they can execute timely and accurately now. Next up, we have metrics management. The business needs shared definitions and a baseline of key metrics. So the problem that we have is our exec team would ask us, we want to present activation numbers during our all hands. What is our definition of an active customer? So by implementing metrics management, the business impact would be reducing those repeated asks for metrics that already exist and provide that consistency across the business. So for our team, to provide that consistency across the organization, we are experimenting and currently going through implementation of the DBT semantic layer to create those reliable metrics from that source of truth that we've already created. So for example, there are many different interpretations of what an active customer is, depending on who the stakeholder we ask. If we ask a finance stakeholder, they would say, an active customer is someone who just connected their bank account. If we ask marketing, they would tell us it's a customer who completed the full onboarding flow. But if we ask product, they would say it's a customer who has recent activity in our platform. So which one is really correct? If we were presenting these metrics in our monthly all-hands calls, the definition from product would probably be the most unanimously agreed upon because it's relevant to business purposes, as it is the customers who use our product is what will drive revenue for us. So how do we surface that as our main metric of an active customer? By using this semantic layer, we are able to create, define, and document these metrics clearly so it is consistent and readily available to the end user. Through the offered integrations, these metrics are accessible by our analysts and ML engineers in tools like Hex, or for stakeholders that prefer the Excel Google Sheets world, they can do ad hoc reporting using these metrics, using metric flow there as well. Next up, we have proactive insight discovery. So like proactive insight discovery, you could think of it, team members outside of the data team are limited in the questions they can ask because they are limited in knowledge of what data exists and what questions can be asked with the data. So our go-to-market team would ask, we're seeing a slight uptick in churned customers this month. What data can point us towards being more proactive to keep our customers? By being more proactive in our data, the business impact could be helping discover those key strategic levers to the business. It would help us become more proactive in problem solving versus reactive. Most organizations have more data than they could deal with, and partnering close with business units as an extension of their teams in a way will help figure out what is important and what is worth prioritizing. So for our example, in the business world, we know that retaining customers is usually more cost-effective than acquiring new ones. Our go-to-market team faces that critical challenge of how can we proactively prevent customer churn. To address this, we've adopted a comprehensive approach, analyzing the entire customer journey from initial interest to full onboarding, focusing on the critical actions taken during the first month after a prospect shows interest, tracking their progression to becoming a paying customer within the first year. Our team's unique combination of data access, technical expertise, and cross-functional insights position us ideally to conduct this complex analysis. So through extensive collaboration with our teams, we've developed a churn score. This predictive metric quantifies the likelihood of a customer discontinuing their service, enabling our teams to receive timely alerts to act upon that. So if they're equipped with this insight, we can implement more proactive measures and targeted interventions to enhance customer retention. And this data-driven approach enables us to detect at-risk customers early and implement targeted actions to enhance that lifetime value of a customer, and thereby playing a crucial role in the company's long-term success and sustainable growth. Lastly, we have, or the fourth one, getting ahead, driving experimentation. It kind of works together with proactive insight discovery, and driving experimentation is driving measurable impact to the business through A/B experimentation and hopefully moving those key business metrics in the right direction. So the problem that we're presented with, our ML engineer would come to us and ask, I've hit a roadblock with the current feature set that I'm using. Are there more data points that I can utilize to enhance this risk scoring model? This business impact by testing with that experimentation will be improved models with higher accuracy, measurable impact of new features. So a data team, as technical owners of these metrics and partners to business owners of metrics, should be partnering with our stakeholders in an organization to roll out these experiments that we can help iterate and drive them forward. So some variations that we tested as part of driving experimentation would be using a trailing 12-month look-back period in our calendar year, trailing 12-month look-back period instead of using the calendar year to account for those seasonality changes, especially we deal with a lot of consumer packaged goods and brands. There's always a spike towards the end of the year versus the middle of the year, like summer. So that helped us improve our scores overall, and it was really insightful and important to us because in the commercial lending industry, it is crucial that we mitigate risks so that we can confidently lend to more customers. And it's important to keep improving and experimenting with our risk model so it could be as accurate and reliable as possible. Now, lastly, interfacing with the data. Interfacing with the data is empowering those team members that we have across the business with information and conclusions they need to be unlocked. The problem that we're presented with is finance would come, and honestly, all teams come and ask this number. Where does this revenue come from? How is it defined in the model? Can I use this number for my weekly reports? And if we can have better interactions interfacing with the data, we can help empower data-informed decision-making. So, given the number of questions coming at the data team, we need to be able to prioritize questions based on impact, understand what the trade-offs of taking on a task are, and ensure that we're building to solve problems, not just building those requested solutions. Instead of spending time answering simple data questions and pointing to people where the data might be, what if we provided them with the tooling they needed to explore and answer those questions on their own? So here at Settle, there's a lot on the screen, but we started leveraging AI tools, something on the left. This tool is called Woven, a tool that helps create AI-enriched metadata for our data models. And that helped us increase data documentation for our models and enforce data governance. So as someone who's had to develop many lengthy data models, there's always that last step of documentation as a hurdle. Getting an assisted hand from AI-generated documentation will help allow myself to not write documentation for 40+ columns and define a big description, but instead I'll be able to review and modify the documentation that was generated instead. It's much easier. And then when we get to the second part of this equation, that's the very familiar dbt Explorer page. We can use that together with dbt Metabase. And dbt Metabase is super cool because it will allow us to have that same metadata that is in our dbt Explorer, the same metadata that we took so long to craft and write documentation for, and now that could be integrated seamlessly right into Metabase. So not all of our end users will go to the dbt Explorer page to figure out what is this description of a data model, how is this column defined. The dbt Metabase integration will allow us to sync that same metadata to Metabase and ensure that we have consistent definitions across our tooling and that the user doesn't need to jump across many different applications just to find out what the data is, what it means. And what's cool about this integration is that it works backwards in the way that it helps us identify exposures with those reports, dashboards in Metabase that depend on the dbt models, our single source of truth that we use. And that way, knowing those exposures will help ensure that all our upstream changes can be accounted for. And by utilizing these tools together, that had allowed us to be more proactive in maintaining our data mart. If source data is changing, say a column was renamed or if it was added, how can we update our dbt models accordingly and ensure that we have full coverage so that it doesn't cause any issues downstream? Having this tooling as part of our team's development workflow has helped us be more efficient, create more robust data models to share across the organization. And as we continue to rely on dbt as our centralized data mart, comprehensive data documentation becomes pivotal in our journey towards self-service analytics. This approach will ultimately reduce that reporting workload on our data team, which ties back into our jobs to be done framework, allowing us to focus on other categories such as driving experimentation, proactive insight, things that require time from the data team. And just to recap, here are our five jobs to be done of modern data teams. From personal experience here at Settle, our team has gotten a ton of value in our organization with our data activation projects. It helps enable our stakeholders to get the data that they really need timely and accurately. And then a favorite of mine would probably be just interfacing with the data. It's an exciting step for our organization to help them get familiar with the data to see what our data team spends so much time producing. So another way to think about this is instead of asking better questions, how about we focus on identifying target outcomes? And what are some possible actions to drive those outcomes? So say we want to have better upsell on our product and allow customers to explore more features. So we can introduce a 30-day trial on the Plus tier product to some segment of the population. Or next, what if we want to drive more activations, get more customers through the pipeline? Let's roll out a new onboarding experience that gets users to that aha moment at twice the rate of the previous. Or let's say we want customers to stop unsubscribing from our emails, and what if we make them more exciting? So instead of like weekly emails, let's do bi-weekly or monthly emails, and that'll hopefully engage the customer a little bit better instead of being more spam. And if we want to increase the cross-sell for multi-product penetration, let's identify current customers showing sign of interest in another product. And lastly, if we want to onboard customers sooner, get them using our product, which will lead to revenue sooner, what if we increase the approval time, the turnaround time for a credit approval decision? So with all of these, some key takeaways could be context over data. So raw data alone is insufficient. The jobs to be done framework emphasizes understanding that context, motivations, and specific needs of stakeholders to transform data into actionable insights that will drive those business decisions. 2, empower our stakeholders. So let's leverage data activation for a more efficient self-serve model. Allow stakeholders to do what they do best as subject matter experts in their own domain, and without the headaches of data wrangling. And lastly, let's foster that data-driven decision-making culture. Beyond providing access to the data, focus on building a culture where data-driven decision-making is the norm. Use dbt to create that single source of truth for your organization's data, ensuring consistency and reliability. Surface documentation on data models so that others can explore and understand the purpose of the data. And lastly, let's develop training programs that teach users how to use the tooling and find what they need to interpret so they can apply those data insights in their own roles. Better visibility is rarely the answer, and the effects of better visibility are what we really need. So when you do the work day in, day out, you already have a sense of the answer when you're creating that SQL query. And from my experience, I've seen over and over that data is usually confirmatory and rarely groundbreaking. You might have not known if the daily active users were 30, 32, 35, but you generally knew what the right answer was, kind of. So looking forward, the goal is to continue enhancing the integration of data insights into our daily operations, enabling that proactive insight discovery and driving experimentation. By leveraging advanced tools and methodologies, we aim to not only meet the current needs, but also anticipate future challenges and opportunities. Ultimately, the journey from reporting to impactful analytics is ongoing, and by focusing on strategic data activation, fostering that culture of continuous improvement, we can ensure that our data initiatives contribute to building more efficient, profitable, and resilient organizations. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
So I know the whole thing was data is not enough.
Yes.
I have a data question.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Our consumption layer in terms of data modeling is a little bit of a mess, and I'm curious if, like, you guys use a specific data modeling, like a Kimball star scheme, or like how you model your data, or if that is not as critical a component as other pieces like the semantic layer.
Yeah, generally we would like to follow the Kimball strategy for data modeling, and then as well as combining like DBT best practices for how the data mart is. So that's kind of like our strategy of how we use data, model our data out. Yeah, yeah. Yes.
I found that it's a lot easier to build models for tactical as opposed to strategic decision making. If you're like, do we attack X vertical or Y vertical, or drastically different, that's like a much harder question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like if it's like, is this campaign doing better than that campaign? That's like a really easy data question.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that topic for strategic versus tactical?
Strategic versus tactical. I definitely think it depends on what the business problem is. It's like kind of what I mentioned is we want to frame it around kind of what is the outcome that we're trying to drive towards, and then that's kind of how we figure out is it more tactical or strategic. Usually if we're trying to build towards driving more business outcomes, it would be kind of strategic in the way that it's a little bit more of a complex problem where we need to take it in steps and break it apart. So that's kind of like generally how we would approach something more strategic and complicated in terms of a data problem. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, I'll start with this one first. I'll get back to you. Yeah.
One of the examples you had was on like the finance team asking where the revenue numbers came from.
Yeah.
In terms of empowering them to figure out where that came from, can you give like an example? Do they go to like the DBT models to look at the source, or
Yeah.
how do you?
So it's still like currently a work in progress for us. So we have like AI generated metadata using Woven, and that kind of creates like a portal where we can share like how these definitions are defined, and that way those stakeholders can modify it, and they become owners of that metric in a sense. And then other ways while we're building that out still would be the usual. We have a topics data questions channel in Slack that everyone goes to, and we have in Metabase they're called like certified tag that we have, and that will ensure that it's that consistent definition that we're using across the organization, and then as well as DBT Explore. It's always there, and then we'll always be able to share it. Yeah. And your question?
Yeah, how do you explain business that in fact to business folks that are asking stuff? So we get a ton of questions where
That's
people
very
want
true.
data because it's interesting.
Yeah.
They can't explain to me what they're going to do with it.
Yeah.
And when you ask that, they pretty much just say the same thing in a different way. How do you get to the bottom of that?
That's a good point. I think, like I mentioned before, for that strategic and like identifying that outcome, it's kind of in a way for our team at least specifically, we have to make it an iterative approach. So like first, at surface level, take what they're asking, generate that, be like, is this what you want? Give them something to work with. Because they don't know what they're trying to build towards, we start with something first that they can look at, they can use, and they'll tell you if it's right or wrong very quickly. And then from there, you can start to helpfully better understand what they're trying to get at. And that's why I mentioned like, what is the why behind of why you're asking this? And if they don't even know, then like, what are we supposed to do? So that's why to answer that why is we're gonna just present them something hopefully useful, and then that'll better like push them towards that path of answering those questions, those difficult questions.
Do the analytics engineers all do that for you all, or do you have like product folks?
It would be for which part? Sorry.
Oh, as far as like the iterations, like getting feedback from them, are you like working directly with these folks?
Yeah, it would be because we manage our stakeholder relationships directly now, being such a small team, and it would just be either me as an analytics engineer, we have a lead data analyst, and then my director of data and analytics that we all work together and kind of facilitate that. Yeah.
Nice job too.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Any other questions? Yes? Yeah, definitely it's just like trying to understand impact and like how badly they need it. A good way my director likes to tell our stakeholders is that like, if I don't get this to you by so and so by the deadline that you created, are we going to lose revenue off of it? Like, what is the impact if I don't deliver this report in a timely manner? And that'll help us kind of gauge like our priorities. If it really is important, unfortunately, we have to switch over to that, build that report out, and let our exec team know whatever metrics they need exactly. So I would say it's not so much of a complexity of like the problem that you're trying to solve. It's more so how do you navigate those stakeholder relationships and understand like what they're really asking and why they need it essentially. Going back to that last problem too. Yeah. Yes.
No, I do have a question. So it seems like, so as you're learning about stakeholder needs, how do you document the things that are important to them before it's at a point where you're ready to like really create a specific definition or a specific way of modeling data?
Yeah. So we kind of take like a two-pronged approach. Like one is like quick, ad hoc, just get something in front of them, like what I mentioned. So we would just, instead of creating that DBT model, it's just a SQL query, like a SQL query usually turns into a DBT model, like when it's lengthy. So we would present that to them in like a Metabase report so they can visually see. If we're not even at that step yet, then we generally have to just, in the ticket, in the product spec, we defined kind of like what domain of data it is, what data points they're needing, and essentially put it all together.
I think it's less, sorry, I think it's less like for the customer, but also when you're talking about recognizing how to be, talk about being proactive,
Mhm.
capture that information so that you can communicate it to like multiple AEs to be on the lookout for this, that this context is important going forward.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm like a little lost in the weeds, but
Never mind. Don't worry about
yeah,
it.
yeah, we can discuss after. I'm
Okay.
totally happy to. Yeah. Anything else? Last questions? Burning thoughts? Yes.
There are many definitions for one metric.
Mm-hmm.
How do we choose the right definition for
Yeah. So it goes back to like stakeholder management, getting everyone together and learning like what that metric means, but also if they're basically two teams don't agree on that same metric, then maybe you really just have to redefine that metric or even split it apart. Be like, this is our product team's net revenue versus like this is how our finance team sees revenue, stuff like that. And then that way you can have two metrics and then not have that ambiguity of like this is what that single metric means. So you might just have to split them apart, and then that's just how it is moving forward. So like, for example, we have a risk score that we call it, very vague naming, but that's for our risk scoring model for credit underwriting. But then we also have like a compliance risk score, which allows them to show like how risky is this customer, like could they be fraudulent essentially. They're both named risk score, and it's very confusing. So you just have to rename the definition and define it in another way, like split it apart. Yeah, if they really can agree, where are these stored at? Yeah, documentation, and then you just create basically two separate metrics in the semantic layer. And they can point to the same model, but it's defined in a different way, and you can document it that these are actually different, and this is how it's defined. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Yeah.
Have you had success getting your stakeholders to think in terms of impact before they even come to you? Obviously, proactive, right? And impact from I'm interested in changing the culture so that stakeholders are thinking impact first before they ask the question. Have you had the ability to do that? If so, how?
think for our organization more so, it's kind of that trickle-down approach. So we haven't pushed that so much. It came from our stakeholders. So that's kind of hard to answer in terms of my perspective. What I would think of is just that, I guess like where are the difficulties like for the stakeholders that you're dealing with? They just want their asks like satisfied in terms of like their ticketing, or like they just don't see further than like why they're asking this question in a way. Like what is the difficulty that like you think you have?
I think the difficulty difference is you're in a good situation with stakeholders who already think that way.
Yeah.
Versus some companies just have people who do not think that way.
Yeah, but I think what helps is just trying to circle it back, giving the data points. Like it's a painstaking process in that sense, in terms of you might have to create multiple versions of this report, and don't give them the one that answers their question necessarily. Give them a different version that says like, hey, if you're thinking about this way, it's going to impact how our revenue numbers look, versus if we do it the way you're thinking initially, of course you're going to get good revenue numbers. The data isn't accurate. It's like, basically fluff. So I would say like a good way in how we approach this is having something to show, having like that data at hand to kind of refute your argument against them. It's good to say no when you have data to back it up. So I think that's how we would approach it. And that's usually if we have any conflicting interest with stakeholders, we use data to really show them the truth. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, if that's all the questions, thank you guys for listening and attending. I really appreciate it.